Correct. So lie on your back to start with, just settle. Just settle. So in Perth, I had a challenge because I'm involved in another group where we facilitate classes, and some of my co-facilitators use the word just a lot. Just do this, just do that. It's very diminishing. It's very, it doesn't really matter, just do it. Just this, just that. And it was really getting on my wick with my co-facilitators, which is probably bears examining. So I had a little challenge, in it, not this kind of challenge where you're looking at your self-image, but where I wanted to be less attached to this word just, because I realised I use it a lot myself. So the group got very engaged in helping me with this. So that every time I use the word just, one of them would pop up. And then in the end, we had to abandon it because I used the word so much. But it was a nice shared collective kind of bonding experience. I don't need to bond. Perth I've taught several times that we didn't need to bond anymore. They're a lovely group, aren't they, Viv? And Viv was there for the just experiment, weren't you? It was an abysmal failure, wasn't it? I just failed. Did he use just as well? Now. Yeah. So Jenny was just saying, Moshe had that with now. I hadn't. That's good. That's good. Another one is so. So I can do that a lot as well. So please, and some of my colleagues find it really a bit annoying in Australia that we would often start with please. And they say there's no need to say please in an ATM, but it's quite Australian to soften an instruction with a please. So, that's something that you can think about whether you want to be use those sorts of words or not.
Maybe we could just all adopt each other's, and then if you're going now, so please.
Now, so please, so far me, say lo, la, la. Yeah, that's right. We could. We could. So you've had enough time to check in on using the floor to reflect back your state of tonus. And thinking how you lie on the floor gives you this opportunity to reflect in a very kind of operational way, like I mean a very physical way when I say operational, about your tonus. It's not an abstract on the floor, is it? You can feel how much your legs are rolled out or not, how close your back is to the floor or not, how heavy you feel on the floor, how wide you feel, how long you feel. All these things are indicators, really concrete indicators of how you are. And now please roll over and lie on your stomach. Notice which way your head is lying and why, which means to work out why you have to have an alternative. Why did you choose one way? Was it purely habit and it doesn't matter, it's just random? Or did you have some sensibility about it? Some assumption, or I'm just the sort of person who always lies with their head to the right because that's the person that I am. And now please lie with your head facing the right, whether you're that kind of person or not. And have your right hand somewhere in the vicinity of your face so that your elbow is bent, so your hand is up. Your left hand can be long by your side if that's better. And start the bell movement with your right hand, your other right, the right on the, so the right, your head is facing to the right and your right hand is up near your right, that's it. And slowly, slowly drawing your fingers together so that they make that, if your palm is down, Your fingers start off sort of splayed as if they're encompassing a bell. And then you bring them together and the wrist can lift a little. So there's that gentle, undulating drawing together of the pads of the finger towards the thumb, with the timing with the wrist. Bless you. And how is it lying on your stomach? Hi, Pat. And slowly, gently keep going with the bell movement of the right hand and take the head to the other side, gently and slowly. And he says, should take half an hour to do it. And find a way, is there a time when it would be nice to lift, to also change, have the position of your left hand change? So you can go back to your head on the right and start again. As your head turns to the left, when is there this impulse, feel your own timing, that it would be nice to also have your left hand upward on the floor. So more towards your head, not down by your side. And then once your left hand is established in the vicinity of your head, leave it there and start the bell movement with your left hand as well as your right hand. And so both hands are now in the vicinity of the head, making the bell movement. And what's the timing? What's the sense of connectedness with the two hands? And keep turning the head back to the right and back to the left, just very slowly. And the hands stay up. The hands stay up. Both hands. Continuing the bell movement and the head turning to the right and the head turning to the left. Next time the head is facing the right, leave it there and find a way that your pelvis could lift a little on the right side and back down, and then lift a little on the left side and back down. And the hands, both hands, continue to make the bell movement. The head for the moment can stay to the right while you explore this idea of the pelvis lifting backward relative to you, so lifting off the floor on the right side and then returning, lifting on the left side and returning. The smallest amount you can. And which way feels easier? Your legs are relatively disinterested, right? They are simply something attached to the bottom of your pelvis. They are moved, but they don't do the moving, right? They're not the active partner. There may be, you know, this kind of echo of the movement through them, but they're not participating. So what's analogous? You're not pushing with your legs to lift your pelvis. There's something that organises you in the back of you that lightens the pelvis on one side and lightens the pelvis on the other, without this need for something distal to lever you up. Can you solve this kind of movement conundrum? Could you imagine that there's just a little lift coming down, you know, a little hook coming down from the ceiling that just lifts up one side of you, so that it's not like this big push up, that it is just a lift, just, J-U-S-T. Your head stays to the right, the hands are continuing to make the bell movement. And now notice if the pelvis moves enough that the leg will start to roll, right? It kind of has to, but can you be really clear in your intention and in the experience that it is being rolled? So most people, when they're lying on their stomach, have their hips somewhat rotated inward. And so as you lift up your pelvis, it will take your heel more inward. So your hip is going to go, your leg is rolling towards the outer a bit. And you could imagine that if your pelvis, the rolling of your pelvis away from the floor, towards the floor and on each side, if it got faster and bigger, that your legs would be kind of flipped one way and the other, almost. Feel the tendency for the flip. And if the tendency for the flip could occur not at the expense of pushing into the floor, but simply because that side of your pelvis lifted up. Leave the hands and just continue with the pelvis for a little while. Does that free up a bit of attention to help clarify this? Lifting of one side of the pelvis and lowering and lifting and lowering. So when Moshe's teaching this lesson, he actually gets people to draw that knee up because clearly they were doing it. So he wanted to expose that conceit. No, none of you here are really doing it, so you can play with that if you like, but you'd kind of differentiated enough. You could feel that's quite different. Feel how now there is an intention in the front of your hip and the back of your knee. And then let it go. And maybe you want to add the head turning. When would the head like to turn to the left? So it's been constrained to the right. What timing would it like to turn to the left? And then how would it like to turn back to the right? What would be the timing? What's the connection between the orientation of the head and the orientation of the pelvis? Could you dissolve the connection and have them disconnected from each other, as it were? So relatively uninterested in each other. So the partnership, one's going to the movies and the other one's going to the market. The timing's different, orientation might be different. And sometimes it's nice for them, you go to the market together. Can they be completely out of step? What would out of step mean? To be out of step, you have to know what in step means. Rest on your stomach for a moment. So that you can just catch up with yourself in this quiet, intimate way when you're on your stomach. And then roll over onto your back. When you've had a chance to suss yourself out on your stomach, roll onto your back and have a full rest. So a meta comment to the ATM teachers, the budding ATM teachers, and if you leave people on their tummies a lot, they're far more likely to go to sleep. People will go to sleep on their back as well, and they'll curl up on their side, but there's something about lying face down that evokes sleepiness. So every now and again, ask them to roll on their back so that you can just see who is asleep. It doesn't matter, you're not going to go up and kick them or anything. You might accidentally spill your coffee over them. Roll over onto your stomach. And a few times, roll your head to the left and time it with the rolling of your pelvis. And this idea that your legs will trail and follow the roll of the pelvis. Maybe even bend a little that way. And feel what orientation your pelvis is in that would make sense for the orientation of your face. So they're together, it's like they're constrained together. And begin the bell movement of both hands again. Oh, that's hard because I was pushing with my hands. Caught you out. Find a way to cheat pushing with your elbows then, because we'll dissolve that illusion as well in a minute. You can live with that little illusion for a short period. And then let your pelvis lie quietly on the floor, so it's not like a dead fish that it can't move, but it's not going to move itself. And keep turning your head. And as your face comes to the right, become very interested in the movement, the bell hand of the right hand, and could the whole arm kind of levitate off the floor? So that as if the bell movement was somehow connected with the whole arm lifting off the floor. And it's timed with your face, so that as your face looks at one hand, it becomes very interested in elevating off the floor. As your head then turns, that hand comes back to the floor, your head looks to the opposite hand, and it becomes very interested in picking itself up off the floor, the whole arm. And do it slowly. And even though I've said it's the whole arm, it could still be a subtle movement, right? But there's something about the face turning one way that would invite that arm to lift up. Something that organises in the back of you that would allow the weight to shift across your chest and that arm to become light. As if it kind of floated up, like levitated up. And your pelvis it's not aiding and abetting, but it's not hindering either. Notice what's happening further down in you, just spontaneously. There's no intentionality there. Slowly. And Feldenkrais likens this movement to something that people might be familiar with, like swimming. Could you feel that there's a kind of connection there, an association there, with the turning of the head and the arm going back, as it were? In this case, it's back towards the ceiling. So could there also be a lifting back towards the ceiling, but like a lengthening above your head? Could the bell hand take your hand further above your head? And then it comes down and your head rotates to the other side, and the rolling of the head somehow is connected with this arm getting lighter and lengthening above your head. There's something in the bell hand that would help this kind of reaching above your head on the floor. Or is it more like crawling? If the vague intention kind of changes, the metaphoric function changes, how does that change your organisation? And is it still within comfort? So as Julie would say, within quality? And what could your pelvis do to support the movement? What was it doing if you had a little sneak peek? What about the little movement of the legs, flipping one side and the other? When would that make sense for your legs to be light enough so they're not pushing on the floor, but they can flip? Maybe the knees can soften towards a little bit of bending. So there's clearly a weight shift across the front of your chest, right? What happens if that weight shift goes down the whole length of you? And it could be this kind of more homolateral thing, so that as your right shoulder lifts up, your right arm lifts up, the right side of your pelvis lifts up, or it could be the opposite, right? It could be a diagonal. You could have a counter rotation happening. That's two possibilities. Explore both. Without compromising comfort. So at this point, clearly Amherst are doing all sorts of bizarre things, and he does a massive rave about see how poorly wired up we are, where comfort is the last thing that we pay attention to. Whereas in our classes, comfort is the first thing we pay attention to, but we keep being reminded, right? So again, the meta comment for you as budding ATM teachers, how do you keep gently reminding your class that comfort is the first thing that we pay attention to? And this lifting of the arm, turning of the head, engaging the pelvis, flipping the legs, comes second to the requirement for comfort. And what are the shoulds in this lesson? Well, I've given you two completely opposite things to do, so there are no shoulds. It's just having a crack, right? It's feeling how I would organise the back of me to be homolateral, so the two sides working together, or how would I become contralateral? In this way that frees the arm to lengthen and shorten, the arm lengthening and shortening along with the hands, folding, unfolding. Leave it and rest. Rest in whatever position you would like. If you're not already on your stomach, please roll onto your stomach. And begin again this movement firstly with the bell hands, both hands making the gentle plucking, stroking movement, drawing your fingers up onto the floor and then lifting them off and lowering them down. And slowly start to turn the head to the right, to the left, with this idea that as your face comes to look at one hand, that it encourages that elbow to lift and comes back to the floor, and the head rolls to the other side, and that it's the orientation of the face that encourages the elbow to lift. And there's this sense of swimming on the floor. And now gently, very slowly, gently, maybe making the movement smaller, could you take your face out of phase with the hand? So as your face goes to the hand, it stays on the floor and the opposite hand lifts up. And breathe and breathe. Comfort and breathing. Nothing is more important than comfort and breathing. So both hands continue the bell movement, but now it's the arm on the side of the back of your head that gets lighter on the floor and the elbow lifts. How could that happen? What needs to happen in the chest to allow that shift, the weight shift, to be different to the head across the front of the chest? And do you feel alien? Does it feel more reptilian? Or like a spastic reptilian swimmer that's on speed? And what does your pelvis do with this out of step between the head and the arms? How is your pelvis assisting or resisting or desisting? And then go back to do it in a way where your head and your arms and your pelvis and your legs feel congruent for you. And it may be like crawling or it may be like swimming. So for some people that's kind of homolateral. Some people it's having a twist. Most people are homolateral at the moment, meaning that the knees bend up on the side where the arm is lifting and the face is looking. Let your arms and your head rest one way, just resting on the floor, whichever way they happen to be, and keep the movement of the pelvis going. And again, do like we did before, have it become a little bit lighter and a little bit faster. Could it then get even faster? Flip, plop, flip, plop, flip, plop, flip. Feel the weight shift across the front of your pelvis, so the weight goes into the ischial, the ilium on one side and then the other, the iliac crest, that front pointy bit. And feel how your legs can really just kind of blip along underneath, kind of rolling over the toes. You might even be rolling over the toenails, but the heels kind of waggle around. It's almost like your legs are a tail, and if you wag your bottom enough, your leg tails waggle. And slowly, slowly reduce the amplitude so that you just come to a very gentle, slow stop in the middle. Rest there for a moment. Bring your head more to the middle so that you can rest your chin on the floor. If you need to use your hands, if your chin is a bit bony, you can use your hands just to cushion the chin, or either way, if you don't need your hands, have them somewhere near the head, but you're definitely chin towards the ground. You can feel, lift up your head and put your nose more to the ground or your forehead and feel how that is different. So there's a reason why he says chin. Okay, so everybody now have your chin being the kind of base, supported with your hands as necessary. And again, slowly start to roll your pelvis. Slowly, slowly now, and feel that, how that's different when your head is in the middle. And that the lifting of the pelvis invites the legs to rotate along with it. And that with that invitation, the legs could, if you now go slowly, that there's that sense that the pelvis lifting, the legs will draw up. The higher the pelvis lifts on one side, that the knees will draw up. They'll bend, in other words. So if the pelvis is lifting on the right side, the right knee comes a little closer to the chest. When the pelvis is lifting to the left side, the left knee comes a little closer to the chest on its inside, and then down. And the legs straighten as the pelvis flips to the other side. The legs are flipped and they bend up. Very nice. Just experiment with having your legs a little wider. See if that helps or not for you. Does that give enough more space for both knees to bend up together? Where does your head want to go? So it's on the chin still, but where do your eyes go? They'll give you an idea about what your head wants to do. What do you feel along your spine, between your shoulder blades, above your pelvis? Now, if your hands aren't busy protecting your chin, could they just start lengthening on the floor above your head and with the bell movement? The bell movement kind of inching them forward on the floor above your head. And if there's a tendency for your head to want to rotate with the pelvis, allow that tendency to grow. And how does that influence the arms? So going slower now so that you can really pay attention to the invitation for the head to move a little one way and then the other, and the invitation for what that means for one arm. And what's the relationship between the ear and the shoulder? So as the head turns and that arm might slide further up on the floor, does the shoulder get closer to the ear on the side that you're looking towards or not? The suggestion's just a possibility, but it might feel familiar. Maybe it's easier one side or the other. Rest for a moment. Just rest. Just rest. Nothing else. If you can stay on your stomach, I'd encourage you to, because you're only going to have to get back on there in a tick anyway. In your mind's eye, can you track through that movement with this kind of intention of becoming a little bit more aware of the bits that you're not aware of? So where do you lose yourself as you're rehearsing that movement in your imagination? So you start off on your chin and your hands are somewhere near your face and your pelvis is rotating slowly from one side to the other. And your legs are free to draw up as the pelvis rotates backwards on one side, so the knees soften. And then as the pelvis returns to the floor, that pushes the legs back down straight again. And as the pelvis rotates the other way, it draws the legs up in the opposite direction to what they were, so to the other side. And then this movement influences slowly, slowly further up your spine between your shoulder blades so that your head is influenced and that your eyes want to change orientation a little bit with the orientation of the pelvis. And then there's something about where the eyes and the head are that encourages that arm to lengthen on the floor in front of your face. If you want to reach, go ahead and explore that movement on your stomach for the last time, okay? So you don't have to marshal your forces for another iteration. But just think it through first and then do, so that any bits that weren't clear, and that it really feels like a lifting, not a pushing. Which means that your body is not heavy on the floor. You're not pinning apart into the floor to produce an axis. But actually, there's nothing staying still on the floor. You're like this kind of worm that's just constantly changing its base. So that if the floor was really hot, it wouldn't matter because nothing's staying on the floor that long. And maybe as the face lifts to one side, that makes that arm feel lighter and it can lengthen even more and maybe lift off the floor. So a lot of people now are getting into reptile where the face side, the hand is going shorter. Try and do it the opposite way, which is, the shorter is fine as well, but just try and have the face arm getting longer as if it's the swimming stroke. Just because this is an extension lesson, that's all. Not because it's particularly the right way to wire up, but just because that's what we're interested in. That's it. Leave it. Good. Find a way to, when you're in one position, that it would be congruent to roll onto your back. That it wouldn't take much of a switch to just use this activity to help you roll onto your back. Beautiful. That's it. So how are you? Now that lesson, this is the meta comment again for the budding ATM teachers, is pretty extensor oriented, but it's not as relentlessly extensor as the flexion one was earlier this morning. So notice whether that information is news to you or not. And it actually doesn't matter because your system is making sense of it now on the floor for what you need. And what is this sense that you're making of it? So some of you might feel that your flexors are more activated now. You might feel longer in the front, you might feel shorter in the back, you might feel longer in the back and shorter in the front, you might feel equally long front and back. Because that's the nature of our wiring. With this agonist-antagonist kind of wiring, but also this, that after you've worked a muscle group, it can feel longer. It can kind of normalize, if you like. So what's your state of being? As I said, that lesson isn't exclusively extensor, right? Because of the legs being drawn up, the hips flexing and the knees flexing as the pelvis raises, that's a folding movement, right? So that's not, and there's a reason that he did that compromise. So it's not a full-on extensor lesson, because when we come back to that movement in sitting, you do have your knees flexed. So you are extending over flexed legs. This is not what he says. This is the interpretation according to Susan Hillier. It could be completely off track. Let's just say, humour me, slowly roll up to sitting and have your legs crossed, so the tailor sit, right leg in front of the left. And softly crossed. You might have learnt that from this morning. If they're super crossed hard and your feet are really, tucked in right close to your pubic bone, it's not so easy. They have to soften a little bit. You have to be a bit more oriental about it. Hands behind if that's comfortable, and begin gently to bring your right shoulder forward and your left shoulder back. Now, how is that? Where does it start? Where does it finish? Come back to the middle. So you don't do the counter twist back to the right. It is very asymmetrical. So that you can really notice this difference about where your head goes. And of course, if your head is free, it will go anywhere. So let's just build in some of the other details. As your right shoulder goes forward and your left goes back, there is an invitation that starts to emerge for the back of your right pelvis to lift, and the weight shifts over onto the left side of the pelvis. And if the next detail is that the back of the outside of the left knee goes more towards the floor, that changes it from just being a rotation to being something else. That brings the arch into the twatch. It's not just a twist. Brings it. That's it. And let your head sink now on your chest so that your chin is on your chest. And as you shift your weight onto that outside left leg, so from the left sit bone all the way down to the left knee, where does your head want to roll to? So let's say one of the ways it could roll is that could it roll so that your right ear goes more towards your right shoulder? And it could be a very kind of, well, I'm just going to let my head roll around to rest, so that as I'm going more towards my right foot standing, that my right ear can rest on my right shoulder. And I could just watch that right knee coming up, the left knee going down. It could be just like that. And the next time you find your right ear on your shoulder, could your head keep rolling so that it rolled, so that it was gently hanging back? And then you could come back to the middle and your head could roll. And then your head is kind of free to really explore many dimensions, different timings. At some point, could you find a way that as your right hip lifts, that you could look underneath your right hip? If somebody's put something there, you wanted to peer down the back of you in that kind of peeping. So it's a different movement of the head now, but is your head free enough to do that? What happens to your hands? Does that change something about the trajectory of your pelvis? If you wanted to push your belly far enough forward, that you're looking around your shoulder. So if you look in front of your shoulder, it sinks your chest, right? So there's a couple of things you could do. You could have your chest sinking in, which will carry your chin more forward, or you can actually push your chest out and you look around the outside of your shoulder. Very extravagant movement. Like, whew, very, what would you say? It's got a quality to it that's reminiscent of Isadora Duncan. Let's call it the Isadora Duncan movement. Over the top of your head. She was a dancer that went to Europe from the States. I think she was sort of vaguely Afro-American. Didn't she have a bit of exoticness in her? No, she wasn't. No. She was exotic, wasn't she? She was exotic in some way, though. She had some exoticness about her for that. We're talking what period? Turn of the century, not this 1920s. Ah, that's right. That's right. I don't know if she was a constant smoker. I don't know about the smoking. Varied tastes. Oh, okay. Dancing was extraordinary. I'm just repeating Margaret's comments. Google it. Forget the Pokemon tonight and look at Isadora Duncan and see if that helps you look under your bum. Somewhere in between. Beautiful. Okay, leave it. Rest on your back. She's very long. I think that's why this reminds me of Isadora Duncan, because she's very long. That's it. She could lengthen, and this movement is about lengthening. And let's just say the lady could twatch. It could be a title of a book, couldn't it? The lady could twatch. And if you're feeling a little asymmetrical, just lie there and live with it. Just imagine that movement on the other side without actually doing it, to really see what details didn't I pick up that I can't reproduce on the other side. Oh, I'm not exactly sure where that foot was, or this hand, or my elbow, or my rib cage. So I think you'll all agree that that ATM has nothing to do with the title, which is on back flexing torso, bell crawl. No, got that one wrong. Oh, Deborah's not here for us to point out how annoying titles of ATMs are. Slowly roll over. Come up to sitting and then standing. Okay, so you didn't have a stand between the vaguely extensor kind of lesson and the twatch in sitting. So you've got two things to sort for, haven't you? Just start to shift your weight from one leg to another and see what leg goes, yeah, sure, you can stand on me. What leg goes, yeah, not really interested in this weight-bearing caper. Or maybe they both go, yep, fine, happy. As you shift your weight, can you feel a tendency for your pelvis to want to rotate one way or not? Over that foot, over the knee. As you shift your weight left and right, what does your head want to do? Does it just get carried over, or does it want to turn? And standing there, what would be easier, to bend over and just crouch down to cut your toenails, or reach up and get the, what fruit is in season, the grapefruit above your head, and have a go? So most people reached up first. I'll take that as we've just done an extension lesson, tick. But you know, you can see why for some people it would be the opposite, right? We've worked the extensors a lot. Their extensors have kind of reduced their activity and they now feel much more comfortable flexing. Could go either way. That's the point, equipoise. It could go either way. So you can essentially fold over, you can essentially unravel and lengthen. Is it easier to lengthen through one leg and one arm? Is it easier to fold on one side than the other? Do you fold symmetrically? So would you rather clean out the bottom drawer now? Would you rather clean out the top cupboard? Don't say neither. Tell your kids to do it. Would it be easier to tell your kids while you were sitting down curled up in a ball, or lying straight? When would you have more authority? And now go for a walk. And in walking, can you get a sense that there may be some folding and unfolding in walking? Or not. Don't have to force it. So how about you get a cup of tea and get into groups of 4. This is both a break and a little group thing, and work out, using your combined quadrupled brain power, why Feldenkrais introduces the bell hand into this ATM series, or into any ATMs. What for? Like, what the hell is the bell hand all about? Is that clear enough? Is he just being a bastard? Okay, so, you know, obviously that might not be, it might be the getting rid of the lunch cup of tea first before you put another cup of tea in. But that's fine, you negotiate. I have to confess